This is the Millennial Realtor Podcast. Today I have Brian Brady who will talk with me about the demographics of millennials and boomers. He had an interesting article online that I saw and I wanted to interview him about briefly. It's called Okay Boomer, Move Please. And so just want to interview him shortly and kind of start this episode. Brian, thanks for coming in and to report this podcast. Just tell us about yourself before we kind of jump into this.
So I am a 22-year lender. I started my life in the mortgage-backed securities world. I used to work for a little company called Merrill Lynch, and I used to trade mortgage-backed securities for them. And then I moved to Phoenix from Philadelphia. And when they closed the bond desk, I got into mortgage banking, met my wife, and we moved to Southern California in 2003. We do residential home loans and commercial home loans, or commercial property loans, all over the state of California.
Very good. Okay. So just for all you listeners out there, if you're looking to get a loan or a refinance, please contact Brian. I'm going to have his contact info in the description and his cell phone and email, so you can start there. So that's always when I bring in my guests in there, just so that they can help them out, because they're helping me out with some of the content. Okay, your article, I found it on LinkedIn,
right? And
I'm actually going to link it in onto the description as well. It's called Okay Boomer, Move Please. It's funny because I've had this thought for some while. When I was working at the Marriott, I want to say 11 years ago, we had this presenter talk about the job situation. So this is 11 years ago, 2009. We've had a downturn, and he talked about the different generations of boomers, X, and millennials, and everyone was hitting the millennials, but he was kind of defending us by saying, well, some of you boomers haven't retired, and you're thinking of it, but you're not doing it, and kind of lagging the job market. And being in this business for some time, I've also thought on the housing side of things. And so it's kind of funny how this kind of hit at the same time that my thought process came in.
Good.
So, talking about your article briefly.
Yeah, millennials are punching bags.
Yeah.
And it's unfair. And I'll tell you why it's unfair. Boomers punch them. I'm glad that okay boomer joke on social media is starting to go back. I'm a Gen Xer, so we're like whatever all the time.
Right.
But it's fun to watch this as a dispassionate. But I always sat there and watched. Everybody complains about millennials, and I've watched and said, look what they've done. You guys have single-handedly changed just about everything we've done in the economy, including the way we buy homes. And watching the boomer millennial struggle right now, I think the Great Recession had a lot to do with it. But you're watching boomers in defensive posture, and millennials legitimately are starting their lives out, and owning real estate's a part of it. So this is going to be an interesting part of the struggle. I know how it ends, by the way. The millennials win.
Yeah.
Because they're younger.
Well,
First of all, right?
Absolutely.
They can wait them out.
We have another 60 years.
Right. So they can wait them out. But the question is, what can we do between now and then so that they don't have to wait them out to get those properties?
Absolutely. So your article, talked about, it used to be that Americans moved every 7 years.
Right.
And what did people, when they retired, do? What was their general behavior as far as with housing?
Yeah, well, they moved to Sun City, Arizona. They moved to Florida. My parents were a great example of that. They sold the big house in South Jersey where we lived and bought a little small house in South Jersey and a little small house in Phoenix because my sister was there and the other sister was there. So they just bought smaller houses near the grandkids, and that's how they took whatever money they made and they threw it in the stock market. But the Great Recession and the crash of 2008 came along, and some boomers had to work longer.
Yeah.
Their retirements weren't ready, and here in Southern Cal, I know it's happening all over the country, but here in Southern California, it's pronounced. Baby boomers are not moving. They're not selling the quote McMansions or whatever single family home in the suburbs that they raise their children in. And I think there's a few reasons for it.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the solutions to that towards the end. So if you're listening in all the way to the end, we have some solutions out there that we're going to provide to you leading up to it. So I guess one problem, I would say, is Proposition 13. It's good and bad because and the good side is that the seniors who've lived in that home for 50 plus years, or 30 years, or even 20 years at this point, because around here in Orange County, 2000 was kind of the point when things kind of went straight up as far as with prices. And so Proposition 13 came out in the 70s, where in Southern California, what we do here now is your property tax base is 1% of the purchase, and it can't increase more than 2% per year in perpetuity. So compared to other states out there, and I lived in Indianapolis for a little bit, and what you do is you have a county assessor coming in and saying, hey, your home is worth this, our property tax percentage is this is your property tax for the year. So it's kind of a pain too, because then you're fighting the county, maybe once every 3 years or 4 years as far as valuations are concerned. So, but now it's 1%, and it can only increase by 2% per year. But obviously, housing has well more than increased 2% per year in the last 30 years.
So Prop 13 is like the greatest thing in the world?
And the worst.
And it's the worst. I mean, it's inherently unfair.
Right.
I remember when I moved to California, my house, which was a townhouse in Solana Beach, my taxes were twice what my next door neighbors were. And they were identical houses.
Yeah.
And it's because he happened to buy it 15 years before I did. So, like, if you look at it from that point of view, it's inherently unfair. But gosh, I mean, don't give the state of California any more money. Keep Prop 13 forever.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the one good thing about Prop 13 is it allows you to buy a house. And let me tell you, if you're in your late 20s, early 30s now, you're going to be in your late 50s soon enough.
Yeah.
It goes by in a flash, and you'll be happy that you've got predictability in property taxes.
Yep.
Downside of that is now you're in your 50s or 60s, and you're going, I sell this property for $900,000 and buy another one for $800,000. Boom. The $900,000 property you own today, you might have bought for $150,000. So your taxes might only be $4,000 a year.
Right.
If you sell that property, you could get hit.
Yeah.
Especially if you go up. But there is an exemption to that, as you know.
And we're going to talk about that at,
Sure.
at the end, so people can listen in and for some of the solutions that we have here, because I don't bring up a problem unless there's a solution involved in there. And so the demographics of 75 million Americans between 1946 and 64 is clogging up the housing market, and you found that from the Chicago Tribune
Correct.
a few weeks ago. So what do you think is going on besides property taxes? Because this is a nationwide.
Yeah, it's nationwide, but again, it's more pronounced in Southern California. And I would suggest if you're a millennial, talk to your parents if they live here in Southern California. The biggest challenge they're going to say is, where do we go from here? Right? And I'm going to try to think of Orange County. I mean, if you own a house in Mission Viejo, maybe you want to retire and maybe you want to move to a condo in Newport Beach. Well, it's going to cost you more money.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's hard. You sell the house unless you're moving out of state. I mean, you're just going sideways. And I think that's been one of the biggest challenges is replacement properties. It's a thing called aging in place. That's a big thing. The other one is the popularity of reverse mortgages. They were very Wild West 10 or 15 years ago. Some regulations changed, and a lot of seniors are saying, hey, I'd rather just stay here in Mission Viejo in the single family home that I raised everybody up in, do a reverse mortgage, and I can stay in it, until I'm not here anymore.
Yeah, and unfortunately, when things go on, I've seen a lot of properties in the last couple of weeks recently where you have a lot of seniors that they have these big houses and they can't take care of it.
Can't take care of it.
They can't take care of that 2-level home, and you see that it's in grotesque condition. I've seen a house where the kids kind of took over, and it was not a very pleasant sight. I had to take 2 showers after I was in that house. Yep. But this is a reality of what happens in life.
It's a reality of what happens in life.
That
I'm going through it. I'm in my 50s, and believe me, I don't like to get up on the roof anymore.
Right.
So it happens.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of what's going to be happening there is that you may not get the best property value for your children or your grandchildren if you're leaving that into their trust. So that's kind of what I've seen out there is the terrible conditions. And maybe what I should be doing is I should be doing more video tours of these houses that are trust sales, probate sales, etc., to see what the actual condition is, because it's not very pleasant to see. Okay, so some of the myths that you talked about is interest rates.
Myths, you mean?
Oh
yeah, interest rates. Yeah, so there was a thought that interest rates were the reason, and the way we know that this interest rates weren't the reason why people were moving is the thought process was when interest rates spike, people are gonna sell their homes and leave, or if interest rates drop, they'll sell their homes and leave. In other words, the movement in interest rates would drive people to make decisions.
Right.
And we saw interest rates go up, nothing happened. Then we saw interest rates come down again from last year,
right,
and nothing happened.
Right.
So we didn't have any more pronounced movement. Interest rate volatility is not necessarily driving things the way we thought 5 years ago. The whole thought process was, as rates rise and then they drop again, boomers are going to rush in and sell their properties and then go buy their retirement property.
Right.
Didn't work.
Yeah.
Why? I don't know. It just didn't work. And I think for the other reasons, they just don't necessarily want to leave.
Well, yeah, and interest rates went up, and the inventory out there was a little bit, more available in 2018.
But nothing like we saw in the late 90s.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But and this point in Orange County, I know you're in San Diego, but the numbers is that this year we're starting with the most inventory in the last 7 years, or the least inventory. I'm sorry.
Oh, wow.
So we're in Mission Viejo. We're at 1.2 months worth of inventory for a single family, and I think 1.4 for attached. So yeah, we are in a real tight inventory right now, even with the interest rates dropping. So that's.
Well, I'll give you another example. I just thought about this too. In fairness to boomers too, the average 65-year-old today is much healthier than the average 65-year-old 30 years ago. I mean, the average 65-year-old today does mud runs, triathlons, especially here in Southern California, swims in the ocean every day, right? Whereas 30 years ago, they smoked, they drank,
Yeah.
So they're more vibrant, and I think that's why they're reluctant to give up that single-family home.
Right, for that freedom, I think.
Doesn't help millennial buyers.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
So the other thing that doesn't really help the millennial home buyers out with this inventory is housing. As far as new housing being built out there, and the problem that we run into that is that community develop. They want to keep the community spirit the way it is.
Yeah.
No, not my backyard.
Right.
We have everybody that's trying to say no traffic, no nothing, this and that. But then you go outside and you see nobody's even outside of their house. They're probably sitting out and watching Netflix in their home when they get home. So
this is a bone of contention with me. We have such a backlog of housing in Southern California. In San Diego County, we're close to 100,000 units behind. They should have built 100,000 units just to keep up with demand.
Right.
That's a lot of housing, right? So I'm sure the numbers are similar or close in Orange County. So, and the reason is people who own homes don't want people to build homes.
Right.
They don't want their view compromised. They complain about the traffic. They complain about the drain on this, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, they just don't want more people in their house, in their neighborhood.
Yeah.
And the reason it's a bone of contention with me is because 30 years ago, I promise you, when they moved in to Mission Viejo or Encinitas or wherever in Southern California, it was a lot less populated then too.
Yep.
And like it or not, people want to move to Southern California. Southern California is pretty much on every Midwestern teenager's mind.
Yep.
They all want to move to Hollywood and or Huntington Beach and or La Jolla. So
I agree.
So what's that mean? The challenge with that is politically, and here's the problem too. Boomers vote, millennials don't. And because boomers vote, they vote for politicians who are going to restrict supply, and they're not going to allow new housing. So it's just going to make it tougher. We're seeing things loosen up a little bit, but nothing like it was 15 years ago.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I don't want to get into conspiracies too, but I think they also want higher property taxes because they want more revenue for the teachers, the fire, the police, the local resources. So they're not incentivized to have lower.
Politicians
property
have no
taxes.
incentive for housing prices to go down,
Yeah.
right? And if the thing is, we look at housing like it's this great big investment. Remember, the first purpose of housing is to put a roof over your head and a place to live.
Right.
So it turns out that it happens to be a pretty good investment, but the first thing is utilitarian for housing. And I think that local politicians all over the state, yeah, they see the fact that housing prices going down just means lower tax revenues and angry voters.
Yeah, and I think, just to be more practical, I think if you wanted something really changed on housing and wanted to add housing, these public events they would have for forums, where I'd place them, Skid Row.
Huh.
Put them on Skid Row,
Perfect.
have that discussion just so people can see what's out there, as far as people who really are not even able to own a home.
Right.
So maybe
or even rent a
change.
home, and that's the challenge we have in California. But we want to talk.
Yeah,
about,
we want to stick with the program.
we want to make sure that we're talking to our customers about how they can thrive.
Yeah, and we want to make sure that we have solutions for you to make sure that you live the American dream, and make sure that we're doing a service to our clients to have them live in a home and live the American dream, like I said. So solutions that are out there. Prop 13. There is a solution to the seniors living in the home, and it's a Proposition 60 and 90. What that is you can take your current property taxes and transfer it to an equal or lesser value home. There is some wiggle room on upward, 5% and 10% depending on when you sell it and when you purchase the home. But you can transfer that in to the next home. But there's only a certain amount of counties that will cooperate, and primarily you and I know this more because it's a big popular Southern California transference. We've had a client that was looking up into Placer County, and it was not working because they don't accept this proposition. So you have to check county by county basis. But if you're thinking, Mission Viejo to Mission Viejo, Mission Viejo to San Juan Capistrano, Mission Viejo to Laguna Hills, that's primarily fine.
Does this county accept out of state?
Yes.
Yeah, San Diego County does too.
Yeah.
So what that means is if you sell a property in Mission Viejo and want to move to San Diego and you buy a lesser price property in San Diego County, that works.
Yeah, so
Similarly.
LA, Orange County, San Diego, Riverside, San Bernardino, pretty much Southern California is very cooperative amongst each other and throughout the rest of the states or the rest of the state. Going north, not so much. They want brand new taxes coming in.
So let's just kind of play numbers again for someone. What's the median price single family home in Mission Viejo?
It's going to be around $800,000.
Okay. So $800,000. If you're a boomer listening and you bought that property 30 years ago, you paid $150,000 to $100,000?
Yeah, probably $150,000 $200,000 in that range.
Okay. Maybe you've got a $300,000 or $400,000 mortgage on that. If you sell that $800,000 house, as long as you go down, or I know there's some wiggle room, but let's just keep it simple for them, and you're paying $4,000 in taxes, you can transfer that $4,000 tax base to a $750,000 house or condo in where? Where can you buy that?
Anywhere in.
Where in Orange County can you buy something for $750,000?
Oh, $750,000 for a condo?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do Ladera Ranch. There's a lot of Mission Viejo condos under $600,000. Aliso Viejo. There's a number of cities that I'm thinking off the top of my head right now, based on that. So
that's a strategy. If you've got if you're in your late 60s and you have a 2-story home in Mission Viejo, you can look at a 1-story condo or smaller place somewhere in the county, and you can keep your old taxes in the new home.
Yep, and that's exactly how 69 is spelled out there. So, and I think just the only problem is as far as the giving up that freedom of that house, and that's where if you can get over that decision, then it's gonna be okay.
I'm not a boomer, but I'm already ready for it. I've got a daughter in college. I can't wait to get rid of the bigger house and downsize and be closer to the beach.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be a great scenario. And other solutions that we've kind of kicked around before we started the recording is an ADU, which is an accessory dwelling unit. So those are these what's called granny flats as well. So it'll be a little bit more tougher here in Mission Viejo, but I want to say ideally where this is going to be hot right now is LA and San Diego. You have these kind of larger lots that have big space between a detached garage and the home. And so what's going to be happening up there now in LA is that everyone's going to be converting a detached garage into a livable space. And so we were talking about that briefly.
Yeah, you can build them too. I mean, there's companies that actually have all this stuff in place, at least in San Diego County, and I know it's doable up here too. If you've got a home with a bigger lot and your kids are moving to Texas and you don't want them to move, they're not able to buy a house here, you got to figure out a solution. And I have a client, and I remember when she came to me 2 weeks ago and said, you know, my son, who's 32, lives in Vegas. His girlfriend lives here. I want him back here. I want him to marry her, and I want him to be able to live here, but it's expensive. And so her plan was, hey, can I borrow some money and build an accessory dwelling unit?
Yeah.
She's building an 800 square foot, 1-bedroom apartment in the back of her bigger house, and that's where her son and new wife will live. And when they have kids, and she's 10 years older, she and her husband will move to the little apartment, and the big house will be theirs. I mean, it's not the optimum situation, but that's the way people are trying to keep families together.
Yeah.
You know, either all the boomers have to sell their houses, or they have to start getting creative to keep their kids here.
Right. 700,000 people left California last year.
700,000 people.
So I think people need to start thinking other creative solutions to keeping families in the state in there, unless they're going to be moving to Texas or Arizona or Colorado. So what was the numbers that you kind of mentioned on the building of that ADU again?
You know, so we ran numbers on that. I have a friend who's a builder. He thinks he can build that 800 square foot for anywhere between 80 and 100,000.
That's great.
So here's the interesting thing: if she were to rent that out, she'd get about $1,200 a month for that. A $100,000 real estate investment that yields that kind of rent is unheard of in California.
Absolutely.
So accessory dwelling units are a way to keep families together and long term to add value to the property.
Right.
And again, I don't know the cities around here where it would work. I think you're going to start seeing it more, especially in, I'm trying to think of cities that have bigger lots. I said San Juan Capistrano, Brea.
Anaheim, Santa Ana might be some of the mostly the older parts of North Orange County that have the long driveways in there where you have the detached garage. Just to give people listening, a picture of that basis, and it's a lot in LA. We just sold our family's duplex a few months ago, and there was a detached garage, and that would be a prime candidate because it's got access to the alleyway, so you can park in the lot if you wanted to in this property, or you park on the street. But 1,200 square feet is. I think it's 1,200 square feet. Might be smaller than that.
I don't know what the max is. Yeah, this is a new thing, and we're just starting to wrap our arms around it too.
Yeah, and I'm assuming there's probably one HOA right now that is suing the state of California for this.
I'm sure there will be. Yeah,
now.
right.
So just stay tuned on that. As far as if you have an HOA that's kind of negative towards this, you'll know your HOAs if that's the case, and especially if it's a newer HOA, because they're a little bit more energetic and they're a little bit more to the T on there. So Ladera Ranch and Aliso Viejo probably not going to be the case, because those are newer communities that they have out here, and they're really aggressive on anything HOA related and on there. This
will be a great topic for another podcast for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know there's experts out there that do it.
So. Yeah, that'd be great. And it's always good to have more information out there. So we talked about that. Am I leaving other solutions?
Yeah. So what do we do now, right? Yeah. I mean, so if you're a millennial home buyer, what do you do? Most of the customers we work with are under 35 years old, and I think there's 3 things you can do. Like, you live here in Southern California. This is like, you're happy to be here. You've got a good job. but it's not working, right? You're just not able to buy a house, or you're thinking about buying a house and you're terrified. Let's talk about a few things. Real estate's not going to crash, right? You could have a slowdown, you could have a small price decline, but waiting 5 years could cost you a lot of money.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why I know this, because I had a customer back in 2015 who said they wanted to be very, very careful, because the market was going to crash. And here we are in 2020, and he emailed me in January, like he does every January, and says, I'm thinking of buying. Can you give me some numbers? Can you run some numbers? And I almost wanted to email him back and say, you're not going to buy, you're going to sit on the sidelines forever. And one of the problems he had was unreasonable expectations.
Yeah.
So I think there's three things millennial home buyers can do. The first is this: move. Leave California, move to Austin, move to Arizona, move to Florida, move to Nevada. But we know you don't want to do that.
Yep.
Right? They're all fine places to live, but nothing beats Southern California.
Yep.
Right? Nothing's going to beat San Diego or Orange County. it's one of the best places to live. The second thing you can do is complain, because I hear a lot of people complain for years, and I watch price appreciation slip away. And they'll complain about boomers.
Right.
All right. And okay, boomer move. Right. I get it. Well, we're done complaining now.
Yeah.
All right. The third thing, and by the way, I want to just share this with millennials. It wasn't just you. Mm-hmm. Right. When my wife and I bought a house, we were younger, and it was hard for us too.
Yeah.
And so what I try to tell them is, you've got to get on the ladder. Yep. Southern California real estate is not a jump, it's a ladder.
Yep.
The biggest challenge I see is, I'll talk to first-time home buyers, and they'll say, I live in this 2-bedroom apartment now, but I want to buy a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house. I mean, I live in this 2-bedroom apartment in Anaheim, but I want to buy a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house in Mission Viejo. That's not apples and apples.
No.
And then they see the numbers and go, oh, it's too expensive.
Yep.
And they give up,
Yep.
and they're still stuck in the 2-bedroom apartment.
That's correct.
Whereas 3 years ago, had they said, well, what does a 2-bedroom condo in Irvine look like? Mm-hmm. Okay. If someone bought a 2-bedroom condo in Irvine in 2016, they're probably looking at a price appreciation.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, definitely, since 2016.
So what happens now, 4 years later, is you've got equity in that condo that you can transfer to the single-family home in Mission Viejo.
Yep.
But you're not. You're still stuck in the 2-bedroom apartment.
Yep.
So that's the first thing, is getting realistic about what's out there and understanding that you just don't jump. You have to jump on each rung of the ladder. The second thing is, and this is going to be important, is when you go to look for a mortgage, write a budget. You should know where your money is being spent now. And if you come and talk to me, or you come and talk to another mortgage person, I'll usually ask people to write a budget, or I'll help them write it and say, what are you spending now? And you'd be surprised at how people waste money.
Yeah.
And what can you afford? The second thing I'd say is getting in the habit of saving money. Even if you owe money and you have student loan payments or credit card payments, saving money. I mean, that's a habit that just, as people start putting money into a savings account, the balance starts growing, and then they start having options. So I think those are three things that millennial home buyers should first start to do: is start living on a budget. I'm going to take some poke at millennials here.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, that's fine.
Like, life is not Instagram.
No,
okay?
it's not. It's
and
not real.
And the problem with Instagram is, like, everybody likes to show pictures of them at rehab in Vegas.
Yeah.
And, you know, hashtag killing it. But what they don't do is show all the accomplishments of buying a house.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to see more young men and women with pictures in front of a nice 4-bedroom, 2-bath Mission Viejo house that says hashtag killing it.
Yeah.
Because I think that really is hashtag killing it.
Yep.
Whereas the rehab in Vegas is not. If you come in and talk to me and you tell me how much you spend on Vegas trips, I'm gonna translate that and say, this is how much more of a house you can buy if you kill that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can't, after rehab, then what do you do with that money from it? It's kind of,
I've been there.
It's gone
I've
through
been
the
there.
It's gone through the toilet.
It's gone through the toilet, right? So that would be the first thing. And like I said, the best thing you can do is just own the problem right now. Don't rely on the government to change it. They're not going to.
Yep.
Don't rely on boomers to move. They're not going to. Because of that supply-demand imbalance, don't be scared about a crash. It's not coming. Real estate's still a good long-term investment, but don't think you're going to flip it every 3 years.
Right.
Like, buy something you can live in, and maybe it's not perfect, but buy something you can live in for 5 to 7 years, because you will get some price appreciation, and you can transfer that equity that you have in the home into the home you really want.
And based on that, and I think you're still on right there, that, I don't remember if I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, but the millennial demographics right now is the median age is 29, and the average home first-time home buyer is about 32, 33, and you can confirm that on your end. Yeah. So we have another 4 to 5 years of increasing demand out there, that there's going to be more millennials that are going to be able to buy a home, even after, getting the rehab out of their system and going to Coachella and all the fun stuff. So,
well, let me give you another one that they need to be scared about, because it's not millennials that are their competition for homes. It's centennials. The centennials is my daughter's generation. They're like age 21 and below, I think.
Yes, because they have no debt.
They're almost as big as millennials. When you look at the demographics of it, they're almost as big as the millennial generation. So if you're 29 years old and you got the rehab out of your system and you're thinking you want to buy a house, but you're sure it's going to crash, and we know the boomers aren't selling, and my daughter's generation, which is almost as big as yours, is coming behind there, you need to get real. Because it's the demographics are such that it's not going to work in your favor if you wait to buy a home. Yeah.
That's exactly the point. Just supply and demand.
Let me tell you another thing too, just because I thought about this. You made reference to the fact that a lot of these homes are that a millennial home buyer might look at might not be in the best of shape.
Yeah.
Which is actually a good thing for them.
Yeah.
So there's new loan programs out. Both conventional FHA and VA has it now, called rehab loans.
Yes.
And they're good for cosmetics. We just did some VA rehab loans this year. They were allowed to add $50,000 to the balance, and as long as a general contractor did the work, they could do the kind of things they needed to get done. It wasn't enough to make it perfect the way they wanted it, like a custom home, but what it did do is clean the place up and updated the kitchen and updated the bathrooms and added a bunch of value to it.
Absolutely.
So the other misnomer is you don't need 20% to buy a home.
Yep.
If you're a veteran, you can do it for $0 down. If you're not a veteran, you can do it for as little as 3% down.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that's key to important. And as long as you have, the reserves and everything else on those programs as well. And I love the rehab loan. I think that's great, because even if you put $50,000 in that rehab loan and increase it by $100,000 in equity, 2 to 1, right there. Yeah.
Oh, I'll give you another great advice I would have for millennial home buyers. And this sounds like we've been saying it for years. Stop looking online for answers.
Yes.
WebMD will not cure your knee problem. You got to go to a real doctor, right? So, and stop trying to figure, it's great to do the research there. And if you go to my website, 12mortgage.com, there's a blog I've had for 14 years that'll help you. But nothing beats doing what I'm doing now, talking to a professional real estate agent right here in your office, here in Mission Viejo, and I can look at things, I can get good information on how to afford a property, and sitting in your basement, surfing the internet, ain't gonna get you a home. And websites don't sell houses, realtors sell houses. The other thing I'll say is when you're out looking at properties, I see customers all the time. They're like, oh yeah, I keep sending these listings I want to see to my agent. And I'm like, okay, guess what? Your agent knows more about what you want than you do, because they're going to take you into a house, they're going to look at your reactions, and by the second or third time they've taken you out, they know what you want.
Yeah.
They're trained and they're experienced, and they know how to get people into homes.
Absolutely. I've noticed that, after the first or second home, I understand what they're looking for. Right. You just gain that synergy and see what they hate, they love, and just have that relationship there. And you can't really tell on just pictures.
You can't tell on pictures because they are deceiving, and they're getting more deceiving because of the technology. You can make those pictures look better. I always laugh when people say, "Yeah, the pictures look. What do you think of this place?" I'm like, "Oh, I guess it looks nice." And they come back and they say, "You should see it. It's a dump." And so. A real estate agent really is going to be the right person for you. Buying a house online isn't going to work. And again, if you can just keep the attitude that not to be too picky, to get something that works for you.
Mm-hmm.
The first rung is the hardest rung to get on. The second, third, and fourth and fifth rung are easy. I mean, you get that house on the beach in Newport Beach, but you got to start somewhere.
Yep.
You're not going to get there right away.
I agree. And just one note to add on there, as being a millennial young person too, as far as browsing through the internet, doesn't work with that. WebMD doesn't work with that. Also, this dating website called Tinder, where people just swipe left, swipe right, it doesn't work. It's there just to get you on the phone and to get the advertisements, and
exactly
just
right.
to keep it. It never works out.
Yeah,
it never works out.
I don't know how that works, but I'm just laughing. I mean, I know the principle. If you could swipe right and swipe left and swipe right and find the perfect mate, it would be a lot easier. But yeah, so don't buy real estate like Tinder.
Yeah.
I know you wouldn't trust your future husband or wife to Tinder. Don't trust your future home purchase to Zillow.
Absolutely. I'm going to quote that in there forever.
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah, so I'm glad that this all came together. So, Brian, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
And
a lot of fun.
I'd love to do more conversations with you and everybody. Thanks for listening in to the Millennial Realtor Podcast. We're just here to help you, give you solutions to help you live the American dream.